Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to do some practice with GDP. And really all this list is it counted? Number one, I'll smack my glasses off. Is it counted? And then if it is counted, which part of the spending approach is it in? So CIGXN. And if it's not counted, why is it not counted? So you would do either the second or the third column, but not both, obviously. So first, your grandma buys you 1,000 shares of Berkshire Hathaway stock for your birthday. But you know, Berkshire Hathaway stock trades in tens of thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So your grandma really loves you. Buys 1,000 shares. Well, if it's just stock, that's a financial asset. And so it's not consumption, investment, government spending, or net exports. Many students think it's investment. Wrong. Investment's not buying stock in this class. So we would say no. Financial assets are not counted because it's not a productive activity in that sense. You spend $487 on a new pair of loafers that were handmade in the United States. That gets counted, yes. And it's consumption spending because you're the final consumer. Your parents buy you a new condo built this year to live in while you attend NYU. So this is new construction, right? And so we would say yes, but it's investment spending. And why is that? Well, just remember, all new construction is always going to be investment because it's kind of like investing in the potential for future income. So if you're buying machinery, if you're building a new building or something like that, it's an investment in capacity, right? Number four, you buy your cousin's 2013 Maserati, so you have reliable source of transportation. Well, yeah, reliable, I don't know, but it's fun. The problem is 2013, that's old news. That one already got counted in GDP, so we'd say no because it's used. Number five, you bake a dozen homemade cupcakes for your sister's garden party. How nice. Hopefully not too many people coming there in pandemic times, but you bake a dozen cupcakes, well, it's home production. So it's not, you're not adding any kind of productive market activity. So we would say no, non-market. Now, if we had said you buy the ingredients for them, that's a separate animal, right? Like you buying the ingredients, that gets counted in GDP, but you baking the cookies or the cupcakes themselves do not. You pay for tuition, room, board, and materials to attend NYU. That gets counted, right? That's a service. It's a service. So we'd say yes, consumption. You go to a bank and turn a $10,000 savings bond into $10,000 in cash. In that sense, you're just changing money from one thing to another. So we would say no, it's a financial asset. Financial asset. At the end of the year, your mom's company finds it has 2.4 million more in inventory. Now remember, potential earnings is what we're kind of thinking about here. And if you have more inventory, you have more potential earnings. So we'd say yes, investment spending. Your parents buy a century-old mansion in the Central West End so they can entertain. Well, again, it's lovely, but no, because it's a used good, right? So the contrast here, you bought a new condo, new construction, that got counted. Well, if it's a century old, it got counted a century ago. It's not counted now. The government contracts with Boeing to buy 30 billion in new fighter jets. That's government spending. Yes. You earn $3,000 in interest on your savings accounts at the bank. Now, here's where sometimes things get tricky, right? Up here, we said no because we just turned a savings bond into cash. That's a financial asset. Up here, we said no, you bought stock. That's a financial asset. But in this case, it's not that you're like putting money in your savings account. It's that you earned $3,000 in income interest. And that's different. That's actually the bank kind of paying you in the sense of you're getting service income. And so the bank is kind of paying you for this. So it actually is yes. And technically, right, we would maybe say that it's consumption spending in that sense. It's probably easier if we think about it as the lowercase I in interest. If you remember wages, rent, interest, and notice that I'm using that lowercase there because the lowercase I is rather than the capital, and profit. And so wages, rent, interest, profit, well, that's interest, so it gets counted. Your friend's grandmother collects $1,200 each month in Social Security payments. Now, this one's tricky as well. Many students often immediately jump to, well, it's government spending. And it is, but it isn't. It is in the sense that, like in a poli-sci class, we would say, well, yeah, this government is spending $1,200. But in an economics class, we'd say no. And that's because the government's not paying for a good or a service. And that's true of every single one of these yeses is you're paying for some kind of good or service, or you're doing that accounting feature essentially. And so we would say no, because it's not a good or a service. And this is like splitting hairs, but again, we want to try practicing where there are a bunch of these tricky ones. You rent a $5,000 apartment in the trendy Brooklyn neighborhood of Red Hook. That is yes, because you're leasing, you're renting, it's consumption spending, you're consuming. You buy a new 70-inch flat screen TV for your dorm room that's made in China. That is yes, and it's net exports. So this actually would subtract from our GDP, right? So it gets counted, but it's subtracted from it in that sense. Your stockbroker earns $48,000 in commission for managing your stock portfolio sales. So this one is trying to key you in here. It's not the value of the stock, because we already established the value of the stock doesn't count. It's actually the commission that your broker is earning. So this is a service. And again, we'd say yes, consumption spending. Your uncle buys and imports a used Gulfstream G650 from a Chinese airline. It's used. And so that's the key observation here. No, it's used. If it were brand new, right, a new manufactured airplane would still count. That would count. So your mother buys 400 store-made cupcakes for your sister. That counts, right? That's yes. In contrast to your earlier, your earlier one where you were the one making the cupcakes, that was a no because it's not a market activity. This one is because she bought the cupcakes, right? So it's consumption. Your father earns dividends from his 400 shares of Apple stock. That's profit. That's a fancy word for profit. And so we'd say yes, and you could either say consumption or you can say profit. Either one's fine, because it is profit under the wages, rent, interest, profit. Okay, so hopefully that took you down a crazy path of trying to figure out which ones you're confused about. You could ask about those during class. I'll see you next time.